Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of the Players NIL podcast. It's a playbook for NIL, making NIL relatable and attainable for all. My guest today is Jeff Cravens from the great state of Georgia and the great city of Atlanta. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited to learn about your career and what you're working on. But as always in the podcast, we go back to the beginning. And I use two words. One is sports and one is athletics. To me, sports is the fandom part. Maybe the first game you went to, first athlete you admired on television or the radio, grandma, grandpa, had a jersey hanging in the closet, something like that. And then athletics, if you did participate in athletics, what that journey was like and how it got to through the early stages of your life. So we'll start with the first question. Tell me about your relationship with sports back in the old days.
Yep, I grew up in a small town in Kansas. Listened to sports on the radio mostly. There was not, in my era, which was obviously an ancient era, there wasn't a ton of sports on TV. I played basketball all the way through high school, and the athlete that I admired most was Julius Erving at the time. I don't know how I got fascinated with the ABA, but I did, and even made the trip over to St. Louis to watch. I think I was one of 24 people that was in the arena watching the Spirit of St. Louis take on the Nets. But that really I grew up almost immersed in sports, either playing, reading, following box scores, etc. It just has always been in my blood, and I really enjoyed playing. And then I realized my senior year that it was probably time for me to look for something else to do besides play. Since I've been extremely lucky in the gene pool, but not in athletic talent.
Good. Well, you're speaking to the choir here. I grew up on Long Island in New York. We're up probably the same vintage. And for me, it was Mets, Jets, and Nets back in those days. And I was there in those ABA days at the Nassau Coliseum. What was it about Julius Erving that captivated you?
I think, in those days, if you started to follow it at all, you kept hearing about this guy that did stuff that no one else was doing. And it was fascinating. And, there was you couldn't see highlights, you couldn't see anything. So it was just fascinating. And then when I actually got the chance to meet him when we went to the Nets game, guy couldn't have been nicer. Really painted a different picture than I think what most pro sports is. But he was first class. The whole organization was first class. Spent time with all those players at the team hotel. It was unbelievable. Just kind of made my experience.
I just read an article about the coach Kevin Lockery, and I remember he was a dynamic and a charismatic coach, which to me was interesting. Tell me about the coaches that you followed. Who did you admire? You grew up in Kansas, you said, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the heart of basketball. Naismith, Fog Allen, all of these great historic figures in basketball in particular. Any coaches in that early phase of your life?
Yeah, probably the two coaches that had the most impact on me is when I went to Kansas and I started working almost immediately on the student paper there. I had a chance to watch a lot of Kansas basketball practices as and I worked at the games. And Larry Brown was such a profound coach and a basketball mind that even to this day, it's crazy how much of a savant he is. And he had a bunch of guys go through there. Greg Popovich came through on a sabbatical and ended up staying. Bill Self and John Calipari were GAs. I mean, it was an unbelievable period there where a lot of great coaches came through. And then somebody who personally had a lot of impact on me was Mike Gottfried, who was the head football coach. Eventually went on to ESPN, and Coach Gottfried would just really help me out. I was struggling with a decision on an internship, and he goes, "Hey, let me call my old center." And he called it up, and the guy was the sports editor for the Dallas Morning News, which at the time was probably one of the best sports sections in the country. And although I was stunned, I somehow was able to stammer my way through a good 20-minute conversation with a guy giving me career advice. It was awesome.
I love it. Larry Brown, talk about ABA, right? He was part
Yeah.
of that with the flared out bell bottom shoes, pants, and the platform shoes. And I have this thought that you can tell a great coach by his coaching tree or her coaching tree. And I happen to know Larry Brown's coaching tree, and thank you for mentioning all those names. It was great, and he's made a profound influence on a lot of people. I think Allen Iverson would come around and tell you he was one of the best coaches he ever had. Right?
Oh yeah. Maybe not when he was playing under him, but afterwards he realized how good they had it.
So you have this fascination for sports. You love basketball. You're from Kansas. You go to college. You're not an athlete, but you're still connected. Tell me about your career and how athletics has played a part in your career.
Yeah, as my wife tells me, I've never worked a day in my life because I've always worked in and around sports, and so I've really enjoyed it. I started out after college. I was going to be a reporter. Went to the St. Pete Times, worked in the Clearwater Bureau, went and was able to cover, among other things, Major League Baseball spring training, and started to wonder if that was really my career. The guy running the sports information office at Kansas, he had always told me, he goes, I think your personality is more fit for athletic administration than being a reporter. And so I took him up on it, went back to my alma mater and worked in sports information, where I had probably the most enjoyable professional experience I could imagine. And I was making zero money, working 80 hours a week, and loved every minute of it. From there, right after we won the national championship in 1988, I took a job with the U.S. Olympic Committee. Didn't really know anything about the Olympics, and ended up spending almost 6 years in Colorado Springs. Got to go to 3 or 4 Olympic Games there. Really had great, met phenomenal people. Was really a great time. Had the pleasure to work for a guy named Harvey Schiller, who was the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference and then became the executive director there. And was really a great time there. From there, I took the hardest job I've ever had in my life, which was I managed the Olympic torch relay for the Atlanta Games. And it was a challenge because we had probably about 15,000 people run with the torch across the country, and nobody had email, nobody had cell phones. Communication was a challenge, but we somehow got through it. And then from there, I started working at Turner, and that's where I moved into digital, more of the digital business. I've worked for big media companies, Turner Sports. I ran broadband video for what they used to call broadband video, which is now streaming at ESPN for a period of time. I've done a couple of startups. One was a high school recruiting platform called Be Recruited, which we grew to about 2 million active users and college coaches. And that's when I really got into the business, and outside of just working on the media side. Then I did some work with NBC Sports, a lot of work at Golf Channel, even though I'm not a golfer and I don't really follow golf, but I did a lot of work on the digital business there. And now I work at On3. So it's, I don't know that I've had necessarily a very linear career path, but it's been a lot of fun, and I've been very fortunate. So I've got great experiences and met a lot of great people.
I didn't plan on asking this question, but it just begs the question. What's the common theme in all your jobs? What did you learn? What made you successful?
I think one of the biggest traits that I think is maybe one of my strengths is listening. I think when you listen, you can learn a lot. And I've been fortunate enough to be around people that I've been able to take bits and pieces of learning that I've done with almost anybody that I've dealt with. And it's really served me well. I think too many people feel like they have to make an impression and really focus more on what they're going to say than what the other person's saying. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned is I've been able to take away a lot from a lot of different people. And, in general, people that work in sports, they're really great people. There's a lot of great people there. I have lifelong friends at each stop that I've ever been.
You're at On3 now. Tell us about On3 and tell us about your job specifically. What do you work on?
Yeah, so On3 is started by Shannon Terry. For people familiar with the recruiting space, he founded Rivals and sold it. He founded 24/7 and sold it. On3 is more of a lifelong passion for Shannon, and he wanted to do something more than just the recruiting business. So I've known Shannon for 20 years. We spent time trying to figure out, when we could do something together, and he started On3 at almost the exact same time that NIL started. And so he started collecting a lot of data around NIL and figuring out how to continue to collect data. And came to me and said, hey, I think there's a business here that's kind of a separate business from our media business around data and analytics, probably focused a lot on NIL. And I think we can unlock and really serve the athlete here, as well as serve the overall community. And so I came on board, and that's what we're trying to figure out is how do we take all this data that we have and provide the right kind of access to athletes as well as the community in general to kind of help make sense of a marketplace that was born, it shouldn't have been, but it was just born out of nowhere with no real guardrails. And I think what you're seeing is now the business is starting to mature in a way that economics always lead it to. And I think you're starting to see some real interesting things happen.
Tell me what surprised you most in the first 22 months of NIL.
Probably the thing that surprised me most, and I continue to be just shocked at, is, the NCAA had almost 10 years to prepare for NIL. They knew from the court decisions going back to the O'Bannon case that they should have tried to figure out a structure to transition into, and they never did. And so I think it has opened up a lot of opportunities for athletes. Not all of it has been positive, but I think overall, when you look at the thing at the marketplace in a macro level, it is in a positive direction. And I think we still have a lot of growth that we're going to see in the NIL marketplace in terms of people understanding what their name, image, and likeness is, what the value of that is, how they should be thinking about that, and really kind of how this is going to lead to a whole different model in college athletics.
Yeah, we could probably talk about the NCAA forever. We could talk about, whether it's good or bad. I always tell people I'm not the arbiter on whether NIL is right or wrong, but it is here. Our company is focused on empowering athletes with educational tools to take advantage of that. As we talked in our warm-up, we're about life skills. The Players NIL is about teaching kids and creating opportunities. For the majority of kids, we know the very small percentage are going to play professionally, but the rest of them, they're going to get a job in real estate or medicine, or they're going to be in insurance. They're going to be in pharmaceutical sales. They're going to be in broadcasting. They're going to be in media. What do you think the NIL world will look like a year, 3 years from now? And do you think that student athletes will figure out how to use this to propel them to a new career or better life opportunities? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing that really in the NIL. I think it has really encouraged those that have a passion about entrepreneurship or just want to learn about business. I think that's been one of the number one things that's come out of NIL is that the athletes who are interested in it and want to engage in it, it's helped them understand what that world is like, and that it's not easy necessarily, and that their brand, you hear the NFL and NBA players talking about their personal brand, but for a college athlete, it's really, to me, about their personal brand almost, and how they're showing themselves in the professional world, not professional sports world, but in whatever they choose to pursue. And so I think you learn lessons there. You make some mistakes, but that's what being in college and your young professional career is about. Take chances, make some mistakes, learn from them, and move on. And I think that's probably the empowerment of teaching real world business acumen to athletes in whether that be how they have to handle their finances, to contract basics, things that I had to learn on the fly along the way in my professional career. They're able to really kind of get exposure and learn that, and I think that's the number one positive. uh, you know Money and everything is great, and I know how much even $50 in college meant for me. But I think that the money and stuff is almost secondary to the life skills that you're enabling athletes by allowing them to explore things like name, image, and likeness. And then the other thing that I think really that this has unlocked is there's a lot of power in college athletes, particularly regionally and locally, where they can do a lot of good with working with businesses. And there was a lot of things that I think athletes in a past era wanted to do to help out, but couldn't because of the restrictions. And I think that this is one area where I see a lot of athletes using their name, image, and likeness in a way that's really positive for them and their community.
Well, I would say that you're a spokesperson for the players NIL with all those great comments, because it's exactly what we talk about, and I do believe it. As a student athlete, you talk about money. I think my fieldhouse job paid me minimum wage, which in 1980 and 81 was probably about $2 an hour, right? So life has changed, but you know what? Life has changed in a good way too, and it's created opportunities. So before we get to the advice section, just tell our audience where they can follow you, where they can learn more about On3. It's a chance for you to shamelessly plug yourself and your company.
Yeah, I think if you are interested in NIL and really want to follow what's going on, we have a great Twitter handle, On3NIL, that you can find on Twitter. Our sports business and NIL content is all aggregated under a web address, on3os.com. And finally, we just launched a newsletter that we've got really strong positive response from a lot of different types of people, that kind of aggregates NIL news. Some of it's legal, some of it's marketing, what brands are looking for, et cetera. And that's a newsletter that comes out 3 times a week that we just launched this past week. So we're trying to get out. We have a full-time staff of people who cover the NIL marketplace, and we're trying to get that information out to as many people as possible, because I think the big thing is I just saw a survey. I was just talking to a guy about a survey, and over 60% of college athletes don't really have any kind of understanding what NIL is. They've just heard NIL and money. That's it.
Yeah. That's good. I think your company does a great job. And as an NIL news junkie, I will tell you that I read as much as I can, and I read On3's publications digitally all the time. Last question, last part. Jeff Craven's high school senior. You get a chance to go back and give yourself advice, career advice, life advice. What's your advice channel look like?
I think the advice that I would have give myself at 18 is the stuff that I was not interested in college, the classes, I didn't get nearly enough out of them as I should. And I look back and I probably, should have taken a different path, more business oriented, just to learn some fundamentals that I had to learn on the fly, which made life a little bit harder for me early on. And I think that goes back to my whole thing is, I don't know that I listened very well when I was 18, but I learned the importance of that, and really have used that to advance my career probably faster than maybe I would have, because I did take an unconventional career path, but I was able to listen and assimilate that information. And that's one thing that I see sometimes is people just aren't they think when you're talking to them that you're trying to tell them what to do, and you're just trying to offer advice. And if they want it, that's fine. If they don't want it, and I think too many people just say, well, what's this old guy know? Maybe that is true. I mean, my kids certainly don't listen to me, but I also live into the axiom that an expert is anybody who doesn't live in your house, which is, I think, what most kids do. But I think that's the biggest thing is, understand that you can get a lot of value that can help you in your life from unexpected people and experiences, and to take advantage of that by really, listening and not worrying about what's on your device, and really engaging in conversation. I think that's something that can really help people go, moving forward.
It's great advice. Thank you for that. And I once worked with 6 and 7-year-olds in an athletic forum, and I had to tell a young girl one time that every time she opened her mouth, her ears closed. And you could see her; she was off on the side, trying to figure it out. But it was the same message. So, Jeff, you're a great guest. I appreciate you sharing your journey. Congratulations on an amazing career. And I think your wife is right. You're lucky. Probably you enjoyed every one of those jobs, and I think our audience would probably look and say they would take any one of those jobs and those experiences. We wish you well with On3. We thank you for all of your contributions to the NIL space, and wish you nothing but luck with On3 and the rest of your career.
Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. Have a great day.